topic that has engaged much of the world has been the puzzling behavior of the United States administration with regard to trade. On the one hand, Mr. Trump had said the most beautiful word in the English language is tariff, that is to say, restrictions and taxes on trade across borders. He's been very committed to this policy for some time, but in a remarkably incoherent and, I have to say, authentically unintelligent way. Let's look at the misunderstandings that guide the current American administration's policy toward trade. First, they begin with thinking that trade deficits are inherently a bad thing, and even all bilateral trade deficits, which is particularly lacking in understanding of the nature of the global economy. When Americans are asked the following question, are you worried about trade deficits? The majority say deficits are bad. But then the equivalently identical question is asked, do you support capital account surpluses? And the vast majority say yes, they're very important. But in fact, it's the same question. The word deficit is so misleading to people because deficit sounds like a bad thing. If you have a deficit of red blood cells, this is bad for you. So a deficit has carried this negative connotation. But since David Hume and Adam Smith, people have pointed out, serious economists, that the doctrine of the balance of trade is completely absurd. It doesn't make any sense. If you have a so-called trade deficit in the aggregate, it means you are importing capital. The fundamental accounting identity, savings minus investment, equals exports minus imports. In other words, if your imports are greater than your exports, it means your investment is greater than your savings. Because those foreigners who are selling goods to people in whatever country is running a trade deficit are, in return, getting assets. They're getting shares of companies, they're getting physical plants, they're getting factories in that country, which means they're investing in the country. And nobody considers that a bad thing. President Trump himself says we want foreigners to invest, and he doesn't understand that when the foreigners invest in the American economy, that is what is driving the trade deficit. It's the investment decisions, not the decisions of consumers and purchasers, that is determining this so-called balance of trade. So the Trump policy is utterly incoherent. We've already seen how harmful and damaging it is to the economy to disrupt voluntary trade among willing participants. There's no difference between trading from one province to another, or one country to another, or one town to another. Trade is trade, and if it's voluntary, it means it's mutually beneficial to the parties who are participants in the trade. And then finally, Mr. Trump and his coterie of supporters have argued that unpredictability is a great advantage in policy. It's possible that in some real estate negotiations, unpredictability may be valuable. But as a matter of state policy, it's a catastrophe. People make investment decisions based on the conditions they expect to prevail. And when the rules change from minute to minute, day to day, up, down, put on, taken off, people do not make those long-term investment decisions. And the consequence ripples through the economy with losses for everybody. A much better solution is a stable policy of free trade under the rule of law and not subject to arbitrary power and the ability of a dictatorial power to impose or remove restrictions, burdens, tariffs, and taxes at will rather than subject to general rules.